When the family lawyer looked up from his heavy mahogany desk and announced that I was the sole heir to my estranged father's $50 million estate, my 12 siblings looked like they were ready to tear me apart with their bare hands. Terry, my oldest brother, slammed his fist on the table, demanding to know if I had somehow manipulated the legal documents. My sister Jane loudly accused me of having a secret relationship with the man, screaming to the room that I hadn't spoken to our father in a decade. I was the only one standing in an office full of people who had dedicated their entire adult lives to serving a demanding patriarch, and I had absolutely no idea why my name was the only one on that final piece of paper. I didn't even know what I was supposed to be inheriting. But when the lawyer finally revealed the truth about where the money actually went, the anger in the room didn't turn to grief. It turned to absolute, soul-crushing humiliation to understand how a $50 million empire vanished into thin air, and why I was the only one left smiling in that office. We have to go back. My father was not a parent. He was a warden. He was obsessed with the delusion of absolute control and discipline. Growing up, our household operated like a strict military academy. Every morning at 4 a.m., regardless of the weather, he would wake us up for a forced mile-and-a half run. If any of us failed to finish under his arbitrary time limit, we were locked out of the house. Bad grades were met with severe discipline. Talking back was completely out of the question. You learned very quickly to bury your emotions, to shut down your nervous system, and to survive in total silence. I despised him. I despised the heavy sound of his boots on the hardwood floor and the way he looked at us like we were simply assets to be managed. The breaking point happened on a Tuesday evening when I was 14. I was in the kitchen when I heard shouting in the hallway. I ran out to find my father towering over my younger sister, Kirby. She was 8 years old. She had brought home a B+ on a math test, and his temper had flared completely out of control. He was aggressively backing her toward the top of the living room staircase, screaming down at her. The protective rage that I had suppressed my entire life suddenly took over. I didn't think about the consequences or his size. I just put my head down and charged into him to get him away from her. The impact caught him off guard, and he lost his balance. He tumbled backward, falling down the long flight of stairs. The fall was devastating. It caused severe spinal damage, paralyzing him from the waist down for the rest of his life. I didn't wait around for the fallout. I knew what would happen to me if I stayed in that house. I packed a single duffel bag, climbed out my bedroom window into the night, and left. I built a life for myself from absolute scratch, far away from his shadow. But my 12 siblings made a very different choice. They stayed. For the next 10 years, they catered to the man who had terrorized our childhood. They became his personal caretakers. They wheeled him around, cooked his specific meals, cleaned his massive estate, and managed his medical care. They constantly fought with each other over who could visit him more often, who could be the most attentive, and who could sacrifice the most of their own personal lives. They missed their own children's birthdays to bring him dinner. They gave up family vacations to ensure he was never left alone. They did all of this because he was worth $50 million. He made sure to dangle that massive fortune over their heads every single day, turning them into desperate competitors, fighting for a future payday. They thought they were securing their financial freedom. But none of them noticed the subtle shift in his behavior over his final years. He had changed. He spent hours alone in his office every single night, the glow of his computer monitor bleeding from under the locked door. He stopped taking their calls after 8 p.m., claiming he needed his rest, but the Wi-Fi router logs would show massive amounts of data being streamed until dawn. They were so blinded by the promise of the inheritance that they never questioned what he was actually doing in there, which brings us back to the lawyer's office. The room was echoing with the shouts of my brothers and sisters. Terry was red in the face, demanding an immediate legal investigation. Mr. Newman, the estate lawyer, simply raised his hand for silence. "There are instructions," Mr. Newman said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The reasoning behind why your brother is the sole beneficiary is explicitly stated by your father. I will read it now." The room went dead silent. Mr. Newman adjusted his glasses. To my son, he read, who willed his own strength by defying me. Who is the only one in this family with enough of a spine to stand up to me at the top of those stairs. You are the only one worthy of my estate. My siblings stared at me, their mouths agape. For 10 years, he knew exactly how he ended up in that wheelchair. And instead of seeking legal revenge, his twisted mind somehow respected the defiance. He hated subservience, and in his eyes, my siblings' decades of groveling were the ultimate display of weakness. Fine, Terry spat, his voice trembling with rage. He gets the estate. He gets the $50 million. Let's see how he lives with himself. Mr. Newman cleared his throat. He looked deeply uncomfortable. About the estate, he continued slowly, there is no $50 million. The silence that followed was heavy. What do you mean? Jane whispered. Mr. Newman turned his laptop around to face the enormous table. The screen was filled with endless, scrolling rows of financial statements. Your father spent his remaining fortune, Mr. Newman clarified, his voice flat, on excessive online entertainment subscriptions. Specifically, private digital companions and late-night interactive streaming services. He was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, every month, for years. After the property liens and the final medical debts are settled, the accounts are virtually empty. My siblings completely broke down. The realization hit them all at once. They had spent a decade of their lives sacrificing their dignity, ignoring their own families, and fighting for his approval. And the whole time he was sitting alone in his locked office, draining their massive inheritance by throwing millions of dollars at random strangers on the internet. You knew? Terry screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. You had to know this was a setup. I didn't know anything, I said calmly, looking at the broken people around me. I haven't spoken to him since I left. They filed out of that office cursing my name, weeping, and completely destroyed. They had banked their entire futures on a tyrant's promise, and he had played them until his very last breath, as the sole inheritor, received the absolute remainder of his once massive empire. It came out to exactly $9,000 in cash the next morning. I went to the bank and withdrew the entire sum in physical bills. I bought 12 plain white envelopes and divided the money perfectly evenly, $750 per envelope. Then I sent a mass text to all 12 of my siblings, telling them to meet me at a local coffee shop if they wanted their share. I genuinely didn't think they would show up. I thought their pride would finally kick in, but they all came. We sat around a large table in the back of the shop. I slid one envelope to each of them. Keep your money, Terry sneered. But his hand reached out. He took the envelope. One by one, they all took them. They muttered insults. They refused to look me in the eye, but they all pocketed the cash. They had degraded themselves for 10 years, and now they were willing to sacrifice whatever tiny scrap of dignity they had left for a miserable $750. I kept absolutely nothing for myself. I didn't want a single penny from that man. Even in death, his cruelty was astounding, forcing them to compete, making them do his heavy lifting, and then revealing he had blown their dreams away in the dark. But as I watched them walk out of that coffee shop, clutching their pathetic envelopes, I realized my father had actually left me the greatest inheritance of all. He gave me the absolute, undeniable confirmation that walking away was the best decision I ever made. You cannot negotiate with toxic people, and if you wait around for a manipulator to reward your loyalty, the only thing you will inherit is a wasted life.